One after another, elite students vanish, only to find themselves guests at a grisly birthday celebration. The movie begins by introducing a girl named Bernardet as she readies herself to meet her friends at a local bar. While heading out, she bumps into Patterson, the headmistress and proprietor of the dormitory she calls home. Patterson makes a passing reference to the Top 10, the prestigious clique that also serves as Bernardet's social circle. Bernardet is part of this exclusive set, comprised of the Academy's 10 highest achieving pupils. Membership demands both exceptional intellect and considerable family wealth. The Top 10 make a nightly ritual of meeting at the bar. As they go their separate ways, Patterson warns Bernardet to return by curfew. Shortly after, Bernardet climbs into her vehicle. But just as she's about to turn the ignition, a shadowy assailant materializes in the back seat and wraps a cord around her throat. Despite her terror, Bernardet has the presence of mind to go limp and feign death, tricking her attacker just long enough to wriggle out of his hold. She flees into the night to preserve her life, but the enigmatic pursuer follows without mercy. In her frantic flight, she spots an acquaintance, and a wave of relief washes over her. Yet, without warning, that person produces a blade and draws it swiftly across Bernardet's throat. Thank God. The narrative then cuts to the bar where the remaining Top 10 are awaiting Bernardet, Etienne, and Maggie, Rudy, Steve, Amelia, Greg, Alfred, and their recent addition, Virginia. They start to question Bernardet's delay, and not long afterward, Alfred arrives with his pet rat in tow. The mood inside the establishment has soured due to the raucous behavior of a pack of older men. Greg, who has been suppressing his irritation, finally boils over and moves to challenge them. Sensing the imminent conflict, Rudy slyly deploys Alfred's pet rat to harass the group of older patrons. The men are incensed by Rudy and his companions' mischief. Grasping that the encounter is spiraling into chaos, the Top 10 members dash outside to evade a confrontation. Upon reaching the parking lot, they catch sight of a nearby drawbridge. Acting on reckless impulse, nearly every member of the Top 10, save for Alfred, opts to engage in a perilous contest, accelerating their cars in an attempt to leap the bridge as it begins to open. The majority appear to relish the intense rush of danger. Virginia, however, is the outlier. She looks stricken with dread. Trapped in the back seat of Greg's car alongside Amelia, Virginia becomes hysterical as Greg floors the gas pedal and launches the vehicle across the gap, despite the bridge deck having risen steeply. Miraculously, Greg manages a safe landing on the other side. Following this reckless feat, Virginia is paralyzed by shock and instantly exits Greg's car, retreating to her mother's gravesite located a short walk from her house. Roughly 1 year prior, Virginia and her mother were caught in a catastrophic car wreck that claimed her mother's life. Virginia lived but suffered significant memory gaps. To this day, the precise events preceding the crash remain a blank. Standing before the headstone, Virginia speaks of her recent induction into Crawford Academy's Top 10 and her joy at finally belonging among the school's elite. But out of nowhere, a rustling emanates from the adjacent shrubbery. Investigating, she discovers Etienne spying on her. Etienne offers to escort her back to the house, but she declines. When she finally gets home, her father Hal gently suggests she not spend so much time at the cemetery. Without Virginia's knowledge, Etienne slips into her bedroom later and pilfers a pair of her undergarments. The following day, Patterson inquires among the Top 10 regarding Bernardet's absence, but no one can provide any information. Bernardet O'Hara is tardy. I'm aware she socialized with you all last evening. Once classes conclude, Virginia heads to her session with her psychiatrist, David, recounting the details of the brain operation she underwent to assist in memory recovery. The surgery is helping her piece together, fragment by fragment, the occurrences leading up to the crash that killed her mother. Virginia has grown to regard David as a surrogate parent. Her biological father is perpetually consumed by work, leaving her isolated, while David offers a constant, reliable ear. Subsequently, Virginia attends a motorsport event in which Etienne is a participant. Etienne speeds to a first-place victory. In honor of his win, the Top 10 plan a celebratory gathering at the bar. After the race, Etienne tauntingly flashes Virginia's own underwear at her. Revolted and furious at the sight, Virginia storms away from him. She later confides in and about the incident, revealing the theft, and verifies that Etienne is known for his peculiar fixation with stealing women's lingerie. That evening, as Etienne revs his motorcycle engine, a deranged killer slips silently up from behind. The roar of the motor drowns out any hint of approach. Without a second's pause, the murderer deftly feeds Etienne's scarf into the spinning sprocket of the bike's chain. In an instant, the fabric constricts savagely around his neck. Etienne is utterly powerless as the scarf tightens its fatal grip, ending his life where he sits. Back at the bar, the top 10 grow increasingly bewildered by Etienne's no-show at his own celebration. Alfred, too, is missing from the group. After leaving the bar, Anne proposes that she and Virginia break into Alfred's residence. Once inside, they are horrified to encounter a collection of taxidermied animal carcasses and a variety of grotesque masks fashioned by Alfred himself. But the true shock comes with the discovery of what looks like Bernardet's severed head, plunging the room into pure terror. Moments later, Alfred emerges and clarifies that it is merely a silicone cast molded to replicate Bernardet's features. The next morning, the top 10 are summoned to Patterson's office for individual interrogations concerning the disappearances of two of their ranks, Bernardet and Etienne, though none will own up to any knowledge. That night, as Greg works through his exercise routine in the gym, the mysterious Slayer makes another appearance. This encounter, however, carries a different tone, as Greg seems to address the intruder with familiarity. Within moments, the scenario turns gruesome as the psychopath crushes Greg's skull with a barbell. A short while later, Amelia enters the fitness area, perplexed to find no sign of Greg. The next day, during a soccer match, Anne and Virginia attempt to soothe Amelia, whose nerves have been frayed ever since Greg's failure to return. In the game, Rudy and Alfred spearhead their team's triumph. After the final whistle, Rudy coaxes Virginia up to the church steeple. Once there, he startles her by whipping out a knife. Virginia panics and flees in terror, making a beeline for David's office. While en route to her appointment, Virginia passes a badly mangled hospital patient, and the sight jolts loose more recollections of her own brain operation, her buried history slowly rising to the surface. Virginia senses a fundamental wrongness within herself post-surgery. She perceives changes she cannot articulate, as if a piece of her identity has been swapped out. Seeing her distress, David attempts to pacify her, insisting that her feelings are merely a natural component of the memory restoration process. The next day, owing to the 3 unsolved disappearances, Crawford Academy launches a comprehensive probe across the student body. A police investigator unearths a student's scarf tangled with a human skull in the school's garden plot, inciting widespread alarm among the pupils, though closer scrutiny reveals the skull to be nothing more than a prop. At the same time, Virginia is jolted in the library by Rudy's abrupt entrance, and his presence brings her a fleeting comfort, given his earlier vanishing act. Simultaneously, Virginia becomes consumed by the dreadful notion that she may have inadvertently harmed those close to her. While lounging with her peers by the pool, Virginia suffers another vivid flashback triggered by Maggie's dive, finally recalling that her mother perished by drowning. This recovered memory unsettles her further, and soon after, she goes to visit her mother's grave, unaware that Alfred is shadowing her with the intent of declaring his romantic interest. In a jarring twist, however, Virginia turns on him and fatally stabs him right there, demonstrating a profound and terrifying shift in her demeanor. She is no longer the person she once was, her actions growing wild and beyond her control. At this juncture, it becomes evident that the masked menace plaguing the group is actually Virginia herself, a suspicion corroborated by the identical gloves she wears to those seen on the killer. The following morning, Hal bids Virginia farewell as he is compelled to depart on a business trip. Virginia appears crestfallen that her father will, once more, be absent from her birthday celebration slated for Sunday. Seeking to console her, Hal vows to make every effort to return in time. That night, the surviving members of the top 10 attend a school-sanctioned dance. There, Virginia persuades Steve to swing by her place. While they share a quiet barbecue meal together, Virginia's sinister alter ego surfaces again as she violently assaults and kills Steve, ramming a metal skewer through his windpipe. The next morning, Anne appears at Virginia's doorstep, mentioning that Virginia had hosted Steve the previous night. Bizarrely, Virginia retains zero memory of ever asking him over. While in the shower, Virginia is struck by another intense flashback to the accident on the drawbridge. In this vision, her mother is irate over some public disgrace they both suffered. As they attempted to traverse the bridge, the span suddenly rose, trapping their automobile mid-structure before it plunged into the river below. To ensure Virginia's survival, her mother made the ultimate sacrifice. When Virginia snaps back to reality, she is alarmed to see the bathroom floor submerged. Investigating the tub, her panic escalates upon finding Anne's lifeless body floating beneath the water. Virginia becomes hysterical and frantically dials David. Upon David's arrival, he asks to be shown Anne's remains, but when they look, the corpse has inexplicably vanished, compounding Virginia's confusion and fear. She grows convinced she is accountable for the deaths of her companions, and her dread intensifies with the belief she harbors a dissociated identity and other self responsible for the string of killings. Virginia posits to David that this secondary persona might have been triggered when the top 10 forced her to jump the drawbridge, the very site of her mother's fatal wreck, implying the psychological trauma unlocked this latent rage. Their discussion stretches on until the clock strikes 12, marking the arrival of Virginia's birthday. Ever her steadfast support, David extends his birthday greetings. As Virginia is home by herself, David resolves to stay and keep watch until Hal's return. The next day, a police detective visits the house to interrogate Virginia, informing her that Anne has been listed as a missing person and that her vehicle was located hidden in the undergrowth not far from the property. David intervenes, claiming Virginia is unwell and insisting that no visitors have come by recently. News of the vanishing of half the student elite from Crawford Academy hits the newspapers, and David subsequently confirms to Virginia that the police did indeed locate Anne's car in the brush, reinforcing her terrifying suspicion of her own guilt. David then urges Virginia to concentrate on remembering the period before her accident. And she gradually recalls that the catastrophe occurred precisely 1 year ago, on her birthday. At that time, her mother Estelle, still striving for acceptance in upper-class circles, had organized a birthday party and invited wealthy students including Bernardet, Etienne, Greg, Steve, Alfred, and Anne. But after a prolonged wait, none of the invitees, including Virginia's own father, made an appearance. Coincidentally, Anne was also hosting her birthday party that same evening, and the elite students chose to attend Anne's fete instead, pointedly excluding Virginia, who was still viewed as a pariah. Mortified and slighted, Estelle flew into a rage and decided to drive Virginia to Anne's house to force entry. Upon arrival, however, they were refused admittance because Virginia's name was absent from the guest registry. This sequence of humiliations plants a strong motive. Virginia murdered Bernardet, Etienne, Steve, Alfred, and Anne's cold-blooded vengeance for the past snubs. That night, Virginia endures a harrowing nightmare starring her mother, who appears hellbent on annihilating the elite students, and she bolts awake in a frenzy before charging out of her bedroom. David, meanwhile, elects to remain seated, allowing her to calm down on her own. But shortly thereafter, Virginia reappears brandishing a metal rod and, without a moment's pause, bludgeons him to death. Hours later, Hal arrives home, having hurried back to be present for Virginia's birthday. Stepping inside, he is aghast at the sight of blood smeared across the walls of Virginia's room. Failing to locate his daughter, he fears the worst. While scouring the yard, he runs into Amelia, whose expression of sheer horror suggests she has just witnessed something unspeakable. Proceeding to Estelle's grave, Hal's distress deepens when he sees the earth has been excavated. More appalling still, David's corpse now occupies Estelle's casket, while Estelle's remains are nowhere to be seen. Shortly after, Hal notices a faint glimmer emanating from a small outbuilding on his land. Entering, he is met with a scene of pure nightmare. The decomposing bodies of the vanished elite students are arranged around the room alongside Estelle's own corpse. At the center of this macabre display, Virginia calmly strides in carrying a birthday cake, leaving Hal paralyzed with horror at his daughter's deeds. "Happy birthday to me." Who, after she extinguishes the candles, Virginia ruthlessly dispatches Hal with the blade in her hand. In the wake of this, a stunning revelation unfolds. There are two Virginias. One authentic, one a fraudulent copy. The imposter Virginia is the one who orchestrated the murders of half the top 10 members, as well as those of David and Hal, while the real Virginia has been drugged and kept unconscious atop the birthday display this entire time. Since I wrecked your last party, I've ensured this particular birthday is everything you ever dreamed of. They've all assembled here with David. He never once suspected it wasn't you. I've done it again. As the false Virginia prepares to slay the genuine article, Virginia rouses and mounts a desperate defense. During the violent scuffle, she inadvertently rips the mask from her attacker's face. Virginia reels back in shock to find an underneath. The truth surfaces, and has harbored a venomous grudge against Virginia for years. She is the true culprit who, disguised as Virginia, murdered half of the top 10. Before each of her homicidal episodes, Anne would sedate Virginia so that the girl would awaken with no memory of the event, easily manipulated into believing she had a fractured psyche. The root of Anne's vitriol finally comes to light. Estelle was Hal's mistress, and Hal is, in fact, Anne's biological father. Meaning Anne and Virginia are half-sisters. It also explains Hal's perpetual absence from Virginia's birthdays. They fall on the exact same date as Anne's. Ultimately, Hal opted to abandon Anne and her mother to start anew with Estelle and Virginia. From that point on, Anne's family unit disintegrated. Her mother fled, and she was left to fend for herself, raised in a crucible of suffering and solitude. As a special treat, everyone gets a front row seat to your death. Shocked? I orchestrated it so you'd never conceive a suspicion. You confided in me. You rendered it all so effortless for me. I even mimicked your voice, walked your walk, wore your clothes. I'd wake with no recollection. You'd slip in and out at will. Just like that father's whore. You've destroyed our lives. That's the reason my mother left us. And now it's your turn. Driven by this seething bitterness, and meticulously scripted every murder, donning a custom-made Virginia mask procured from Alfred to convince Virginia of her own madness. Her solitary aim was the total annihilation of Virginia's world, stripping her of everyone she cherished, mirroring the desolation and herself had endured. Just as Anne readies the killing blow, Virginia thwarts her and strikes back. In that decisive instant, she plunges the knife deep into Anne's abdomen, and Anne expires at her feet. At that very moment, a detective enters the shed and finds Virginia drenched in gore with the weapon still in her grip. Lacking any context, he immediately deduces that Virginia is the perpetrator behind the disappearances of the Crawford students. Consequently, it appears almost certain that Virginia will be apprehended and face judgment for atrocities she never actually perpetrated.